Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good night, or good evening, wherever you are. Fellow netizens, welcome to another episode of the net.lol. Yes, this is your open source and networking podcast with all of your hosts, myself, Kyle Mestry, Brent Salisbury, Dave Tucker, and Tom Nadeau. Today, we have a very special guest. We're really excited to welcome her to the show. So I'd like to give a warm introduction to Serpil Bayraktar. Serpil, we're excited to have you on the show. Would you like to give us a little bit of a background on yourself?
Thanks so much, Kyle. It's such a pleasure to be here. Let's see, I have been a network engineer for 30 years almost. That could be older than most of you. If you're wondering my name, why it is strange, I'm from Turkey. I went to school at the Istanbul Technical University, and I was in electrical engineering. My plan was to really do some VLSI or fabricate some integrated circuits, but life took me to US following a boy, and then I was kind of looking for a job, any job. And I stumbled across this network operations center at the University of Michigan, like walking distance from the family housing that I was living. And that was the operations center for the NSFNet project. Now, I know a lot of people know the ARPANET. I know a lot of people know the commercial internet. But guess what? There was actually this transition period called NSFNet that was funded by our National Science Foundation. And it was a project to connect supercomputing centers and regional networks, and it was completely free. The partners who won the contract from NSF was MCI, a brand new, circuit provider, IBM to do the routers, turn their RS-6000s into routers.
Yeah,
and then, believe it or not, they had really
Believe
good
it or not,
routers.
they made routers at one point. And MCI was a company.
Stayed. That's right. That's right. Let's see. And the University of Michigan was contracted to actually manage the whole thing. So they had this 24/7 operations center. So I totally, I just ran across, I had no idea what it was. It was a technical job, and I was like, okay, I'll go. And the funny story about that is when I was going, my English wasn't so good. My ex-husband now said, just tell them you are very enthusiastic. And I was like, sure, I can do that. So I go there. They gave me a tour of the operations center. I don't know if you guys know Bill Norton, Dr. Peering. He's the guy who wrote that big rover at that operations center. He was like a PhD from University of Michigan, and I worked with him for many years. In fact, I inspired him to do his MBA because that's what I ended up doing. Everyone was going to school for something, and I couldn't afford the University of Michigan engineering school, so I ended up going to an MBA program in a close-by university.
Wow.
But
It's
anyway,
funny
I went to this
you
place.
said Michigan, because a lot of people don't think of that area as doing anything in tech. And it's ground zero for all these cool things, like this.
There's still a lot of cool tech coming out of there, right? Like Duo Security came out of there as well. Arbor Networks, I think, is from there.
I was just going to say.
Yeah.
And
definitely from there.
Cool stuff.
Yeah. Cisco acquired the company from there. That's how Dave Ward found himself at Cisco.
Right. I actually worked there after they acquired Dave. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Funny story. Briefly.
That's very
I was contractor
interesting.
at Lucent when they bought their thing. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
Small
there's
world.
so much to say. It is a small world. In fact, most of the people I met there are running big networks around the world now, which I find very interesting. Yeah, so I had the interview. I didn't understand the thing that they said, but I said at the end, I am quite enthusiastic. And the hiring manager, Dale Johnson, said, why? Which I was not prepared to answer.
Huh.
So it was a good meeting. So that's how I started. I did operations for a while, and then turns out I really enjoyed BGP routing protocol for whatever reason, and it
Wow.
was the beginning of
You're
the
into the black
protocol.
magic.
That's right.
Do you do multicast too?
I did eventually. I avoided it for many years, but at
Oh
Juniper they
man.
did the next gen multicast VPNs, and I was like,
Hmm.
we have to stuff multicast into BGP. Oh no.
Yeah. Oh
Well,
no.
we did that. Yeah, yeah,
I think
yeah.
that
So
that BGP is actually a really good segue, I think, as well, because I know. I'm not sure. Maybe people are aware, but Serpil and I were both in Dave Ward's organization at Cisco CTAO, which was a lot of fun. And that's actually I first met Serpil that way, working on open source. I think there was even a BGP open source project you may have worked on, if I'm not mistaken.
that's correct. One of my projects in Dave's organization was to make BGP available to application developers. So our goal was to stream public or private BGP data in real time and then parse it. So you don't have to be a networking geek at the bit level. We'll do that for you. And then we published it to a Kafka bus. And then you could then take the information you want, store it in a real-time database that we wrote for ourselves, and do all kinds of analytics with that. So the project was a lot of fun, and we were using public BGP data already, so we decided to open source that. And we ended up open sourcing. It was called Streaming Network Analytics System, SNAS.io.
That's right. I remember that streaming network.
Okay.
Yeah, and it
Guess
ended
who?
up in the Linux Foundation, right? Did it not?
It
At some
did.
point? Yeah.
It
Yeah.
did. But guess who came up with that SNAS.io name? Make a guess.
Dave. Dave.
That's right.
He's good at
Dave.
names.
It had to be Dave. That's what I was going to say too.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
picked the two working group names that I helped start too.
Ah,
Yeah, they were. He's good at acronyms.
Yes.
he is.
Yes.
He is. Yep. So I actually worked with the Linux Foundation to start the project and start the community. Eventually, I moved on to other things and I transferred the management of that project to CADA, UCSD Research Center.
Yeah, that was a pretty
Fantastic.
interesting project for sure. Was that related to that Panda project as well, or Panda was a project that sticks in my mind that was BGP related from the Linux Foundation too, but I sometimes get it confused. I
Well,
think.
Panda was analytics.
Yeah. Okay,
It was
analytics. That's what it was.
PNDA.io. Yeah,
Yeah.
That's
another
right. And
another
it
name.
wasn't related, but we started around the same time, and their goal was to, house all data related to networking, and BGP was one of them. And they really wanted to use the BGP data to do some interesting things with the network. Do the analytics, and then based on the result of that, go and reconfigure the routers to do some interesting decisions.
It's funny, like you guys went on and built that because that's exactly what that original SDN working group that Dave and I and a few other people helped tried to start at the IETF. Like it was like when we were at Juniper briefly, just after you guys left. It was right around that
Yep.
time, and that was really one of the things that came out of it was like applications not needing to be a router to get routing
That's right.
stuff. Not even injecting routes, forget that, like just listening to what's going on and not having
That's
to
right.
be, which is, and you know this as well as anybody here, it's an operational disaster. Getting into a real operational network and racking something, whoa, you don't just
That's
rock up and
right.
slap your thing in and plug in, right? And that's why that kind of stuff is really transformational because it opens the door to a million applications that we don't even know we haven't even conceived of that can chew on that information and do something cool. And we've seen that now, like when we did ODL, we we built a BGP client for
Right.
that, and it was the same sort of thing. We ingested that and went, oh, we can do TE and PCE injection and things like that. Um,
That's right.
So these,
We
yeah,
did
these
have
these
an
these projects are
integration.
cool.
Yeah, we did have an integration with ODL, and there were
You did
service
too, right?
providers interested. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
using our system to feed ODL to do some interesting network applications.
Yeah, I mean, we were doing stuff at a bunch of the tier ones with that. I I had built the ODL at the last place. It's really interesting, the sort of offline routing things you can do, offline traffic engineering, offline whatever, all the stuff, you thought was impossible because it took too long or whatever. It's not suddenly you have a wall of servers and you give it the data and off you go, right?
Well,
Really cool.
and I think the other thing is with the project,
And I think
I think with a project like you're describing with SNAS, it's a good way to kind of show another example of the IETF and network engineering kind of coming together with open source, and I feel like it was one of the earlier projects that really did that a little bit. It kind of tried to bring those two together, and we've seen a lot of that over the years. So it was you were kind of at leading that edge, I think.
that's right. We were using BGP monitoring protocol, which is an IETF standard. In fact, we were the ones who drove it to RFC. It was just a draft lacking. John Scudder, in fact, the author of BMP, I had worked with him at the operations center back in Michigan. Yeah,
Right, Scott
so
was from Michigan too, right?
that's right. Ann Arbor. Yep, yep.
Yep.
I worked with him back then.
Jeff is there
Um,
too. It seems like all the BGP geeks are in Michigan.
that's
Jeff,
right.
yeah, Jeff is there too. That's funny.
Jeff Haas. Yep,
Us,
yep.
yep. Yeah.
He was there. Yeah, he's still there. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so it was very interesting for me to see how IETF works and how the open source world works. Because I had worked within the IETF, I understood it fairly, but I had no experience in open source. So that was a lot of fun
So
getting to
wasn't it
know how things
interesting?
work.
Like we were all kind of there around this transition where we went from the IETF being the only thing, right,
Right.
to this open source machine that started to, and like what was, tell us about your kind of experience during that time. I mean, I know from my experience it was weird and wonderful at the same time, thinking what is happening? This ITF thing I've been doing for 10 years seems to be disintegrating, or really not disintegrating, but just a lot less impact. And then this open source thing, which used to be Apache and Emacs and whatever. I mean, just these little tools you'd use. Now
That's
suddenly
right.
it's like the thing. So how did
Yeah.
that, how did you navigate that,
Yeah, so what open source has that IETF quite didn't have is the code.
Mm.
Open source is based on working code, and that always beats the writing of the standards. To be fair, IETF standards required implementations before they could be standards. So you had to have multiple implementations of something before you can say it works. But people who participated in IETF didn't have to be
Didn't have to write
developers.
the code. Wasn't it funny though for a while? And I think it still exists in the routing area. You still have to have two implementations, even though they're derived from the same open source code base.
That's right.
Doesn't seem that
That's right.
antithetical to me. Like, why? It's the same code. It's
Yeah,
going to interoperate. It better. But that was one
that's
of
right.
those
I think,
tensions, right, at the time.
yeah, I personally think there's a place for both of them. Actually, I don't see IETF completely irrelevant, to be honest, because you have to have standards at some point if you want to be able to work with other vendors, work with other groups. And in fact, there was a group who was trying to bridge the gap between open source and IETF at that time that I was working on the open source. There was a big initiative. I'm not sure where they are right now. Maybe you guys know.
What was that?
There was a group of people who were trying to
I
collaborate from
Oh,
both
in the
sides
IETF. Yeah,
in
I
the
helped with
IETF.
that for a little while. And
Yeah,
you remember That was like that. Remember Dave did that keynote at one of the IETF meetings where
I
he
think it
stood
was
up there and
100.
everybody
Right. Yeah.
threw bottles at him. They were like, this is crazy. This open source stuff is garbage. And then I remember I was there and I was there with a few people and thinking like, wow, everybody in here is missing the train. It's going that way. Stop throwing rocks and get on board.
That's right.
Um, and it's really funny because it's whatever now, 10 years later, and it's old news. But at the time, I remember it was like people were basically saying heretic, heretic, uh-oh.
Yeah, and
And
look at
it
look at
was
how it's
hard.
evolved. The IETF has
Yeah.
evolved. The hackathons are part of their culture now.
That's
They
right.
have been for a while, but I think
Yeah.
some of that came out of the things you're referencing there. So yeah, it's been
Well,
interesting
all
to
of
see.
these people started doing the hackathons, right?
Yeah,
Started getting involved, and that was like I was working on like the NetConf Yang stuff with Jan and some of the other folks,
yeah,
That's right.
yeah,
and
That's
we'd
right.
show up. Those first hackathons, there were like 10 people there,
yeah.
going, wow. Now you go and there's the whole place goes on Sunday
It,
or whatever. It's Saturday, sorry. Right.
and a lot of that, as much as none of us want to admit this, perhaps a lot of that actually stems back to OpenStack again, because I remember
That's
2012,
right.
2013, 2014, that time frame where it was the center of the universe and everyone was coming to these OpenStack summits, and I think they picked that up from there because a lot of these OpenStack summits had these developer events as well. I mean, I think they're called like project
It
working
wasn't
groups
just a
now where
show.
you'd write
Yeah.
code. Right. And I think that some of the IETF members picked up that mindset from there. So, as much as we can debate how relevant OpenStack is or where it's used now or anything, I think a lot of the cultural things that came out of it are what have made it relevant as you look back on it and you look at what's happening today in the industry.
Yeah, and we
Pace
we
of change,
fight
right?
now to make sure that any of these open source conferences are a developer event. Developers are as
Yeah.
important as the marketing or the other stuff, which is not important, but too.
Yeah, Stack taught me that you can move very quickly. And that was the cool thing. The innovation in Stack was very fast, whereas IETF was slow,
The
very
wait
painfully slow.
cycles.
But
Yeah, it
you're
was.
bike
Isn't that
shedding at
funny?
different levels. I think
Yes.
that's what's kind of funny about the IETF is that, we'll bike shed about it, but we'll agree at the broad strokes what it's going to look like. But I strongly believe that this data structure is going to be a better fit, and we're never going to agree about that bit. So we're just going to go our separate ways on implementation. But in open source, the tension really comes where you have to get down to the real
You have to
details and the
get the
agreement at
code
that
to be
level and
the
agree,
right,
right?
because there's only
You
one
have
code.
to agree
That's the thing. Yeah,
until there isn't, right?
until there isn't. Right. Well, yeah, but yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
but so
What I
so
did
like
learn from open source, though, is that open source is not free. Building
no.
a community is hard, and you need people dedicated and really care about that code, be the leaders.
Yeah, it's not all volunteer. I mean, it's not. You can have volunteers, but you're actually uncovering a really important thing to talk about, which is open source is a commercial business model too.
Yep.
It's not all like kumbaya and we're all going to have fun and we're all friends. There's still commercial stuff, and you have to show up and do things. So you can innovate quickly and then you can uninnovate, like Dave was saying, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Um,
And I wonder the tension between the commercial interest and how that affects really what kind of code got developed, the quality, the feasibility of the code. There is still a
do you have
tension
any
there.
examples from your project? Because I know like the four of us have them definitely from our previous ones. I can name a few off the top of my head.
You should name them. I'll refrain.
Is it like the
We're
ODL
all
one?
being
Remember
cautious.
yeah, we don't want to have that PTSD moment again. That ODL showdown with Big Switch and Cisco Codebase. Remember that one?
Yep,
To
very
to
well.
to and there were things like that which like when I was going through that was my first like real like I'm coding experience in open source. And it was shocking how commercial it was because until that
Yes.
point, I didn't get a read of, you know what I mean? Like you were there, Kyle, right?
Oh yeah.
And I think Brent was definitely there. Um, and it was really like, oh, wow, there's commercial here. Wait a minute. This is just like the IETF again. It's
That's
politics
right.
and the same old crap, but it's just a kind of a different crowd, you know?
Yeah,
It was really fun.
it's definitely the case, and I will have definite PTSD remembering when I was the PTL of Neutron and running that, and the
Right.
tension from all of the vendors, and the people that were working on the core Neutron, and the stress involved with these core members that could merge patches and what they were going to merge and maintaining other vendors' code. I mean, all of those dynamics were none of the things that anyone signed up for with open source, if we're all being
Like or
honest.
expected, right? Everybody
Yeah,
thought it was some sort of like cleaner, higher brow
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
experience somehow, you know what I mean? Nah, it's still littered with politics and everything
Oh
else,
yeah,
like anything else.
yeah.
Does
Yep.
anybody else remember trying to explain this to business people inside a company of like how open source works?
Oh my
And they're like,
gosh.
so we're doing stuff in open source now, like everything's cheaper. And you're like,
Not
No.
really.
no, 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 no. It's actually more expensive because it takes us 10 times longer to actually do anything because we have to get agreement from this person, he's this company, and he only works on this project 3 days a week. And yeah, so many other people can disagree with it. And, I may or may not actually be able to contribute this feature I've been working on into the upstream project. And people are looking at you like, so how are you going to ever get anything done?
How
Like,
does
how,
that
how
work,
are you
right?
actually going to move this forward? It's, yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
Well, or the
Well,
other
and so
one,
I'm
which
kind
is, go ahead, Kyle, sorry.
of, and I was
Or
just
Brent.
going to throw out this, Brent. I think there's as much of an art to it as anything else, right? So you can be an amazing, we throw around meritocracy a lot, and yeah, the best programmer in the room is very important. But at the same time, if he or she is a complete jerk, um,
Right.
it becomes a lot less. I mean, it can become toxic across the whole project. So I assume you've probably run into that over the years. Like, so how do you deal with that in an open source project?
Or do
Is
you
that a
have
question for me?
Oh
yeah,
yeah, sorry.
yeah, or do you have any stories of, war stories basically from your open source experience?
I actually
And you don't
don't
have to name names, but
because,
you can. That's cool too.
yeah, my tenure with open source was not very long-lived. It was about a year. Um, what I struggled most, and I realized shortly after we started, is that you need some sort of a structure around it to run it so that you can handle issues like the one you're pointing out, Brent. I mean, it was just two of us, the developer and myself, running the whole thing, so it was easy. But then as soon as we started getting other contributors and what they wanted to do, I realized that, well, how do you make decisions and who gets to do it? What I noticed before this call, I was looking at Linux Foundation for resources. They now have much more resources around how should you be starting a project, running a project, develop your community. Those kind of guidances, I think, are very helpful. They didn't have it back then. I mean, we were just starting. You just go there with your license and off you go.
Yeah,
So
I think the
my
first
experience
three
was more
projects I did,
confusion.
we made that up. Yeah, we actually had to remember
That's right.
you had to make up the governance, you had your own rules. Now we're at the point where, like, in Apache does this too. I worked in Apache before I came to Red Hat.
Hmm.
And the organization realized that it's one of its biggest benefits is what you just said, Treble, is to guide and, care and feed the projects.
Right.
And
Right.
and to do that, you need to provide a skeleton and a structure and a rules of engagement too, and things like that. Because otherwise, it turns into a food fight, which we've seen
Exactly.
in other things,
Exactly.
right? And that's never productive.
Yeah. But Brent, if you want me to talk about jerks in general at work, I have lots of examples of that.
Well, please do. We'd love to hear it.
We're here for it.
We're here for it.
That's right. Well, I'd like to shift the conversation a little bit because I think one thing that we'd like to talk about is maybe something that the tech industry's been talking about for a while, right? And we're talking about diversity in tech and Serpil. I know you've done a lot around programs both inside and outside Cisco around women in technology, and I think you've been an inspiration both internal and external in that area. Can you tell us a little bit about the work you've done there as well?
Yeah, sure. So I've been with Cisco about 8 years, and for the past 7 years, I've been running an event, a program called Women in Technology. It's a monthly event. Every month, I bring someone to speak, maybe sometimes a panel. We had workshops, and it's for technical women. That's the main audience, but I actually like it when everybody attends, especially our male allies. And if the topic is really good, like how to maintain Docker containers or Kubernetes, I have a lot of 50-50 attendance. So it's been a really good program in the sense that it brings all of us technical women together. So when you are a technical woman working in your cubicle, remember back then you went to the office and sit in your cubicle, it can feel very lonely. That's right. You might think that there are no other women, females working in the industry like you, but the fact is there is actually quite a few. So my goal was to bring everybody together so that, we can share experiences. But I wanted to do it in a sense, in a technical context. One of my biggest complaints as a woman engineer was that when I'm working on a project, that's all I'm doing. I don't see what's going on in the industry. And if you're stuck with a project that's not so interesting, you can feel left behind very easily. So what I wanted to do with these sessions was, since I was in the CTO office and, interacting with the new things happening, I wanted to bring those topics, experts from those topics, to the attention of the technical woman so that they don't feel like they're missing anything. The other thing is that women are, in general, I'm speaking generalities, in general like to speak when they know something. And I worried that with any new technology, learning the vocabulary of that technology is like understanding half of the technology. And I wanted with these sessions for them to feel more comfortable around the words so that they don't feel like idiots when, this is discussed, or kind of be mindful of what's really interesting. So I've been doing that for 7-8 years, every month. It's been really wonderful.
It is
Cool.
a great program, and I had the pleasure of actually speaking at one of those events when I came back, and it was really exciting, and to see all of the interest there and to see everyone that attended that as well, and I think it's super important to do that as well. Speaking from experience as well, my oldest daughter is kind of exploring technology careers later in high school now, and she's already kind of noticed, even in her programming class, that there's not as many women in the class, and she's kind of digesting that a little bit. So even at a younger age like that, she kind of sees that already a little bit. But so I think it's a good topic.
Yeah, I don't know if you know this, but the numbers of female engineers is actually dropping instead of increasing. Like it used to be higher in the 80s when I went to college, for example. And I tell you, I've been a woman engineer for 30 years. Once a month, I think to myself, I swear to God, I'll get out of this area. Something happens and I'm like, that's it, I'm done.
I think we all think that. It's not just you.
Yeah, that's right.
That's probably.
So, Serpil, is the women in tech thing is that meetup you run, is that public or is that an internal Cisco program?
It's 50-50. If I find a Cisco executive talking about strategy, we keep it internal. But I actually had speakers from all over the different parts of the industry, including Advanced Imaging Society that Dave is involved with from Hollywood, talking about how to bring in creatives and technical people. So it's 50-50. I have a mailing list of people external to Cisco that I send the announcements to. Um,
Cool. Do you want to
my
share that here?
external
Or
speakers become part of that. Yeah.
do you want to share that here, or we
So,
can post up a graphic with it on here for other
Yeah,
people to
we'll link it in the show notes and
link
yeah,
it there?
graphic
Yeah.
here. That's
ab-
awesome.
absolutely. And I just started a new web page, external web page. People can see some of the speakers. And we have a YouTube channel for external talks. I highly recommend Dave Ward's session talking about how to take care of our female geeks. It was quite
Fantastic.
controversial. Yes, yes.
But it got
Yeah,
people thinking. I mean, part of it
Yeah, I
is
mean,
that it's just like I do this in my organizations too, like how to how to get people involved, how to and I do this internally, try to get other underrepresented sort of groups, not just females,
that's right.
into stuff that we do. And it's sort of like, for me, it's like the more data is more better thing, different
Hmm.
perspectives, different, like I've had projects I've worked on where we've had female engineers go, hey, have you thought about it like this? No, that's a good idea, and it just like makes the whole situation better. And like I've seen some of your external ones, and I
Hmm.
really appreciate how you've uh, you're very proactive about saying, look, here's some ideas, get involved. It's important to get involved, not just to talk about it. Sort of like
That's
our open
right.
source narrative, like write code. Get on with it, and influence that way.
Yep.
And then it's up to the rest of us to make sure you have the opportunities to get involved and do that.
Yeah.
Um,
And I would say, Tom, that if you want to start something in your own organization or in your smaller circle, go for it. There is room for everybody. Like we are
yeah,
all trying to do something. Sometimes people say to me, well, Cisco has this program. How is yours different? I'm like, they're all complementary. We're all trying to do the same thing. Different
yeah, we're all
initiatives are
trying
all
to.
welcome.
Yeah, we're just
Exactly.
trying to more, like I was saying, more better, more input, more better, and if I have, even if I only have a few female engineers, if they're not as involved as the other engineers, you know, it's not good for everybody. It's better that they're involved as much as, these two guys who work in my group,
Yeah.
and also contributing the same ideas too. That they don't feel like kind of like you were saying, like if you don't understand the terminology or the whatever, and you feel like you don't, you're not comfortable getting involved. Really, is what it
Yeah.
for me. The feedback I've gotten is, wow, you've made it comfortable for me to operate here. Um, really, that's
That's
it.
right.
You know.
That, yep. Yep. That's right. Um, and what I found from my initiative is that the more person your initiative, the better. So I've been running these events. My biggest event was attended by more than 1,000 people around the world. The topic was career development. Um, Even with that type of audience, I try to at least meet in person. I welcome everybody as if it's a dinner party. There is something to be said about feeling included as a person, as an individual, and not get lost in these things.
Yeah, and it's just being, valued for your contribution. I mean, that's
That's
kind of
right.
the bottom line. Like you want to, you've contributed as much as Dave has, for example, and so you want to get the same kudos and the same, I don't pick on Dave, but you know what I mean? Like,
It's okay to
and
pick on Dave.
it is. Check the webpage, Dave.
Check that.
Um,
It's.
Yeah.
I think
but
the
yeah,
other thing is like we're all senior here, and I think that as we senior in terms of I'm not that wasn't an age reference because we're all old maybe, but we're also senior in terms of experience. I meant,
Also
but
true.
I'm saying that as we at least for me as I've gotten older, I really take the mentoring aspect really serious, and there's one thing I really love about my career is being able to spend time with more junior members of the team, and try to up level them and help them out. in that aspect, and it's really good when you can do that from a diverse perspective as well, right? Whether it's women or other
Absolutely.
diverse groups, and try to up level them and bring them in to the conversation, and then give them the tools so that they can succeed on their own, because everyone kind of brings their own perspective and their own experience to the situation, and I think that's pretty special.
You're actually touching on a very important aspect, Kyle. Uh, we need men to be mentors to women because there aren't as many women to be mentors, for one thing. The second thing is, um, as the Women in Tech program, even though the name is Women in Tech, I actually welcome all of my female coworkers to be participants because we need everyone as allies. And I also always remember if you're a diversity group, you have to be inclusive of others. You can't just say we don't want men in this
Right.
meeting or session. So it's quite important that we work together to end the diversity because it's very difficult for the minority to do something unless we have the allies helping out. And
Yeah,
mentorship
you
and
don't want to
sponsorship
be
are all
exclusive
very
when you're.
important topics.
Yeah, you don't want to have an
Exactly.
exclusive group that you were just trying to get away from being exclusive, right? And that's what I was saying. That's how I treat it is, um, really inclusivity. And like Kyle was saying, like when I'm mentoring females in my organization, a lot of times it's kind of funny. It's like I have to, and this is going to sound really funny, but I have to like almost give them permission to be bold and, go do it. I mean, it's like they were waiting, some of the folks, and it's the mentoring thing. I'm like, no, that's okay. Do it. You're as good as any of these guys. Go for it.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like the thing like Kyle was saying with his daughter. I tell my nieces this. I don't have any daughters, but I have nieces, and I say, look, your cousin just tackled you in the soccer game. Go back and do it again. Do it to them. You can do it just as well, and it's okay. You know,
Yeah.
and and I think that's one of the weird things that's I've had in conversations is a sort of like reluctance, really like a not permission was the wrong word, but maybe a reluctance, like a hesitation, and
No,
I
that's a good
it's like
That's a good observation, Tom. I want to make sure that I acknowledge that there is that reluctance. One thing I find myself is that because this is such a male-dominated culture in tech, it's kind of quite aggressive. And sometimes I find myself, I need to interrupt to say something, and which makes me feel rude. So what I've been talking about lately with regards to this topic, make some space. Have some
yeah,
pauses for people to say, not just for women, actually. There are also a lot of men who don't get a chance to say something.
yeah,
In my
introverts, yep,
current group, this is a thing, and I really like it. My manager has these long pauses, which is not something I've witnessed in Cisco before. It's wonderful because it gives me a chance to say something. So making space is an important aspect of this.
And I think that is super important, especially given the situation with COVID, and we're all on these video calls. I sometimes find it harder when you're on video calls with double digit people to kind of inject yourself a bit.
to
So I
get
think
in
that
there, yeah.
space is very important and very relevant, Serpil, with everything going on now and all of us working from home and that.
Yeah,
That's
and I
right.
do
So,
this like with my managers. I make sure they like you actually that's what I say, Sherpa. I say that you must carve out the space for people to express their, provide their input, and if you don't, whatever their gender is or whatever, they're going to get mowed over in the conversation. So step back,
You'll miss a
bring,
good opportunity.
yeah, you might miss a good idea.
Like Brent was, yeah,
Even
like
Brent has
Brent
a good
was saying
idea every
something.
now and then, right?
I know.
occasionally. Well, no, what I love about it, I think on every team where we're missing diversity, I always feel like there's kind of an empathy gap. And what I think women bring infinitely better than men is that ability to A, read the room, uh, and B, have some just typical empathy, just basic empathy of is what I'm going to say going to come across completely horribly wrong. And
But it
I
doesn't
don't
mean you can't
I don't know
arrive
how
at a
we.
really good solution, though. Even though you want to, you don't like Sherp was saying, like can have a super aggressive, thing, or you can talk through it and get the answer anyway. You know what I mean? You got to recognize that you can do it both ways,
Yeah.
or a combo.
I think women are infinitely superior at it, so we need more of them on teams.
Definitely.
Yeah,
So-
Microsoft actually had a group where women were part of the design stage of the products. Like they were very active in bringing the female aspect into the products, like putting the buttons somewhere. And there was a really good example about Nest, the thermostat.
Yeah.
The
Well,
example
my
I
wife
was
showed me
given
a
was that,
thing. The lead engineer for the Honda Odyssey is a woman, and it's really funny. Like we had one, and the placement of the stuff when I would drive it was a disaster. I didn't know where anything was. And when my wife drove the car, everything was exactly like she wouldn't even think. Yeah, it's over there. It was really funny.
yeah,
So it's true, it's
yeah.
there's a different way about it, and it still works.
So empathy and also a different way of thinking. And that's not just gender, obviously. It's race and culture and
Yeah, it's all of
other
those things.
aspects.
That's more like my attitude is more data, more better. If you've got some good input, put it on the table. But make space
Yeah.
so they can put it on the table. That's the thing.
Yeah.
This is one of
Yeah.
the things we talk about meritocracy a lot in open source, but it's really not all about what you know and how you can apply it. And that's something which I think we often fail to forget. We often forget, right? That there's a lot of soft skills that go into making software, and there is a lot of things that we need to learn, especially the large incumbent groups like white males, myself included. I need to get better at learning to be more inclusive and be less aggressive and unlearn some of these behaviors that I've had to learn to succeed in this kind of weird tech bro culture. So I think if there's anybody that's unsure about whether they should attend, a Women in Tech event to learn a little more, and to understand the other's perspective, and then just to learn how to be more inclusive, then don't hesitate, go to it. So thank you, Serpil, for hosting those events and encouraging other people to come along.
Yeah, it's a good.
My pleasure.
It's a good outlet for us to get a different perspective.
Yeah, I'm
Yep.
definitely going to be in the audience, so I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Can I also interest you in being a speaker?
Dave would love to be a speaker.
David,
No, I have
can
to
sign
think of
us
something
all up.
interesting to say. Yeah,
we'll all go. You sign us all up.
absolutely.
We'll either
Excellent.
say something
Awesome.
nice, or you can throw rocks at us. It's either way.
Yeah.
So Serpil, I think we're getting close to the end here, but I wanted to give you a chance. I wanted to leave you with one question, so you have a chance to talk with us about this for a few minutes here.
Sure.
I wanted to ask you, what trends do you see going forward in cloud networking and security, and where do you see the industry going? And I know that's a big question, so feel free to go wherever you want with that, but I'm curious what your thoughts are there.
Okay, maybe I'll tackle one aspect of it because it's a very broad topic. I want to start by saying that I was reading the Phoenix Project by Gene Kim recently. I know it's a very popular book.
It's a
Most
great
of you
book.
must have read.
Yeah.
There is a part in there that talks about core versus context. Core being what creates the business value and context being everything else. What I think has been happening in the last 10 years, really, but it's now picking up speed, is that enterprises look at their networks. Is this core for us? Networking and security. Is this the business I am in? Or if there are providers of it as a service, could I just outsource this big, operationally heavy, expensive stuff to a service provider? So I think a lot of the networking and security is moving to the cloud. That's why I actually switched to the umbrella team at Cisco, because I wanted to see how this evolves and maybe contribute to it. So my guess is that it started with the SDN and then SD-WAN, basically being able to run your network over the internet and not needing to be your own service provider. Those are, it takes a lot of talent. If somebody else can do it for you, why wouldn't you do it? So I see that there's going to be a transition, just like IT applications moved from on-prem to cloud-based, providers. I see a trend in networking and security moving to cloud providers as well. And that's coming from the business need, really, and cutting costs.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
I
cool.
agree. I
I
think
mean,
that's the logical place where it's going. Yeah.
Well, you can see it today. I mean, you can see, that's what you're saying to me is what I'm seeing too, is that not just the big cloud providers, but even other folks, are other options now. And really getting down to the brass tacks of like, is this the business we're in? I mean, this is the question with, like with where I work. We ask this to people all the time. Do you really want to roll your own thing? Or do you want to just, buy it? It's the same question to ask for the entire thing, for their entire network. Are you in the business of running a network? Can you hire the expertise to actually run this and keep it secure all the time? And, it's expensive. So good
That's
point.
right.
And
That's
I'm
right.
definitely seeing that all over the place now. It's a interesting trend. We'll see how well we can pull it off.
Absolutely.
That to me is the
That's
big
right.
question, right?
I can see them
I
kind of
totally agree
desperate
with
to.
that.
Carl wants to know if service mesh is part of that future, Serpil.
That's
Always,
right.
It
He
always
wants to
comes
service
back to
mesh it.
that. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Well, Serpil,
And on that
thank you so
bombshell.
much for joining us today and talking with us. A lot of super interesting topics there. So we were very honored to have you on the show today.
It's been a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much. It's a lot of fun, and I hope you join my Women in Tech events
Yeah,
and maybe
definitely
your
will.
audience.
Definitely
love to.
will. We
Absolutely.
hope everyone does that, and we'll make sure that the links are there and everything so everyone knows where to go. So thanks a lot, and thanks to everyone listening.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening, and have a great rest of the day.